The Middle Eastern wars gave us increased numbers of amputees or people with varying degrees of paralysis, generally affecting younger people. So there's been more blogging and articles about wheelchair carry in recent years. Forgotten, I fear, were the more senior people who suffered illness or injury resulting in loss of mobility or partial paralysis. Today, we're privileged to speak with lifetime martial artist, accomplished shooter, instructor, and longtime contributor to the self-defense, law enforcement, and military equipment industries, Clyde Caceres. Welcome, Clyde, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Gila. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful having you here. Can you give us a brief bio highlighting your martial arts involvement and the accomplishments in your work in the gun world with an eye towards exploring the foundations of your self-defense principles?
Yeah, I can. It's been something I've been doing for, I don't know, decades and decades now. I used to study martial arts very intensively and opened up my own school. And what I found happening then as the transition happened is more and more law enforcement people were coming into the training. And my experience with guns prior to, say, 1985 had pretty much been hunting, like a lot of people, hunting or target shooting or plinking. Well, the world of guns now became something very dynamic with personal safety and life-saving issues. So we started working with retention and disarming and things like that, which gradually led me to join a police force part-time, which then enabled doors to open for me in the firearms world to uh, to work with people like you and your husband, and which I appreciate so much, and to be able to become, oh, for instance, things like a Glock enforcement firearms instructor and a whole lot of other things that I was able to pursue after that.
Well, and then fast forwarding to today, I found that in researching and preparing to talk with you on camera today, that I have enormous trouble calling you a stroke victim or a paralysis sufferer. That was just I couldn't go there, and a host of other words that are in really our ordinary vocabulary. Do those words apply, and how do you see yourself then, and how did that change over approximately the last 6 months?
Yep, 7 months now. Those are really good comments. Those are very standard words, disabled, handicapped. And maybe I shouldn't, but I shy away from those or boldly shy away from those words. They're standards, disabilities and so forth. I tend to use mobility restricted or mobility limited instead of those words. That's just my own personal point of view. I knew when I got into the hospital up in Hamilton, Ontario, July 5th of 2023, obviously something was wrong. They did a few tests for me to confirm stroke, and it was confirmed. About 3 o'clock the next morning, when I was in the hospital bed, I'd been admitted, I realized my whole left side wasn't working at all. I woke up and it was real clear, probably at 5:30 in the morning, that my whole left side was just out of commission. So I thought several things. I thought, one, that I still have capability. I still have a purpose. I still have missions, and I'm going to stay strong in that way of looking at it. My faith helped guide me through that. I also realized that I had to do a couple of things. I had to keep my right side strong because it's the only side that works, and I had to keep my core strong. So I immediately started doing crunches the night after my stroke in the hospital bed. And the nursing staff came in looking at me like, "What are you doing?" And I told them what I was doing. I thought at the time, little weird things like, I keep my wallet in my left pocket. Well, now I need to move it to my right pocket. And when I pull out my wallet, how am I going to open it and articulate taking credit cards or money out of it? So I thought that's going to be core strength, manipulating a wallet for dexterity, small dexterity skills. And I told myself I was going to come out of this stronger than going into it. And I also told myself by the time I get out of the hospital, I'm going to be able to manipulate my wallet and wipe my own butt. And both of them accomplished.
Your mindset, of course, is the key, but you were very physically fit before the stroke, and congratulations on that, because many people our age really can't say that. But I wondered how a less fit individual, which may be our viewers of this program, how they would adapt to those daily tasks, to say nothing of self-defense techniques once we've got reduced mobility, loss of left side function in your situation. And then we complicate that, because many of us are in our 60s, 70s, maybe more. We complicate that by age, diminished physical strength or flexibility that tends to come with that. And as you're reaching out to your peers, or even if you see people in your faith family, that type of thing, how are you, what are your thoughts on adapting around that?
The physical limitations are going to vary between people. There are people in way worse positions than I'm in. Um, and I think you need to mentally come to grips with, okay, the anticipation of getting better and healing. But then probably 2 months ago, I sat and thought to myself, okay, what if this is my condition? This is where I need to be. What am I going to do with it? And that's actually where chairwriter.com was born. Um, but I think people need to mentally come to grips with the reality of where they are. And if they have faith, it helps. Um, and then work within your limitations, and try to expand your capabilities. I work out hard in physical therapy 3 times a week, and I push myself. I'm only making incremental improvements, and it's kind of frustrating in a way. But if you know what your limitations currently are, maybe reflect back on what you could do and use that as a goal and mission to try and achieve some semblance of your prior capabilities, and then adapt in order to overcome. And I've done a ton of adapting.
What does the adapting look like?
Oh my gosh. Um, well, I've tried using those grabber things, that squeezy grabber things, and sometimes, maybe once a week, I might use one. But I look at something, for instance, that's up high, and I force myself to stand, catch my balance, and reach for it. I look at something that's on the floor, it falls, or I drop it, or my wife drops it, and I'm constantly saying, leave it, I'll get it. And fortunately, I'm flexible still. Um, so I do the reaching down and picking up any little thing that falls on the floor, the cap off a water bottle, piece of paper, anything. So what I try to do, getting back to the fitness part, besides working out at physical therapy gym 3 times a week, I try to use my muscles every time I do something, whether I'm leaning or going forward or stretching. I try to use my muscles constantly, keep them somewhat toned.
And I want to backspace a couple of paragraphs, because you made a reference and we shouldn't leave people wondering, what is chair rider?
Oh, um, that morning I was sitting drinking coffee I get up at stupid early hours of the morning. So it's probably 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting in the living room. It's probably October. And that's when I came to a thought like, what if I am like this? What if my limitations are what they are? And I'll be in a chair. Hopefully I'll be able to will myself and be blessed through it, but I might be in a chair and this might be it. So then I thought, what am I going to do? I'm not going to, my wife will tell you, whenever she brought up the idea, even prior to stroke, of sitting on a porch in a rocking chair, I'd run. I go, no, 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 not going to be me. So I don't golf, I don't fish. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I've had a background in defensive tactics, whether it be with your hands or whether it be with equipment. I've had a background in manufacturing life-saving tools, Crimson Trace lasers, DKX body armor, etc. And I thought, and I've got a background in training people. I've taught thousands and thousands of civilians as well as law enforcement and military. So I thought to myself, why don't I combine the two? And why don't I start doing defensive tactics for wheelchair bound people. And that's where the whole thing came about. And it grew and it morphed from purely defensive tactics. There's an element of that within my program, but it's really building a community of empowered people through information, through products, through training to make them stronger, give them more functionality and empowerment. So that's what chairwriter.com is.
Well, that's very inspirational, and what a role model you're giving us. And this leads directly into really the nuts and bolts of what I was hoping to talk to you about today, and that is distilling, I guess, or applying the main principles on which, how did you say, well, all my life I've moved to the position of advantage, or all my life I've done this control technique? How did you distill and then apply those kinds of principles to self-defense skills following your stroke, or have you completely rewritten the book?
I wouldn't say rewritten, but I'm extrapolating things that work, looking at things that don't work, wondering why and how it can be enabled, and realizing some things just I've got to do workarounds, constantly adapting and overcoming and doing workarounds. The skill sets, because of immobility on my left side and really reduced mobility on my left leg, maneuverability, agility is a thing of the past. I pretty much have to rely on what the capability of the wheelchair is in terms of pivots, movement, advancing, withdrawing, and that's a big limitation. So my skill sets are really, my mindset is be aware. It's huge now because I can't jump back and react to something. It takes me a while to react. So try to give me a little more anticipation time. Understanding my mobility is slow right now. So awareness, critical. Distance, critical. So I use my verbal abilities to engage people in a friendly manner, but also to verbally push people a little bit away from me if they're too close. So I'm getting a sense that they're encroaching in my space for nefarious reasons.
Well, and I think one of the really useful things that this takes us into is, while you are, and thank God for this, able to stand and balance yourself, as you said, when you're exercising, reaching things and so on. There are people who are double amputees, and so what you're working out is going to have enormous applicability beyond your particular situations, and that's of course something we always look for. And you started going here, and that's almost a prioritization, because in self-defense we tend to say, okay, I've got verbal, I've got avoidance, I've got evasion and escape, and you started taking us there. The wheelchair prioritizes that somewhat. How are you doing that?
It really does. Like I said, distance, trying to maintain distance is important. I think a rule of self-defense that I've always put up as the first one, and I'm sure you'll agree with it. When I tell people in a class what the most important rule of self-defense is, and people say bigger gun, more ammo, whatever, the reality that I put forward is be somewhere else. So it's the evasion and avoidance part, even prior to that, where you anticipate where you're going, what you're going to be doing. I constantly have to think about, is there access? Am I going to be able to get through a parking lot? There's all kinds of variables that come into play. In one of the things I wrote, I mentioned that my three-dimensional world is now two-dimensional. And my two-dimensional world is what's ahead of me and what's under me. And I have to be constantly aware of that. Little things like, how heavy is that door? Which way does it swing?
I'd like to backspace just one sentence where you talked about having to plan your trip, plan your outing to the nth degree. And I'm remembering something the late Marcus Wynn said in an interview I was privileged to do with him before he passed. And he talked about preloading our drive time, because he was in Minneapolis at that point, and it was dangerous. And he said, before you leave the front door, your transition zones, you know where you're going to go, you know what you're going to be looking for. And it's very much an echo of how you've adapted to now you can't presume, oh, I'll find a parking place.
Exactly, exactly. Um, uh, maybe I can't find a parking space. Maybe it's far from where I need to be and it's raining. Um, maybe I'm at the wrong entrance. And if I'm at the wrong entrance to a building, I've got to back up to my vehicle, load the wheelchair back up, climb into the vehicle and find the right entrance. And there's just a lot of little things that I never thought of 8 months ago. I would see the wheelchair signs and handicap access, and I go, "Well, that's good. I'm glad they have it, but I have no relationship to it. But now I do, and so I'm constantly preparing ahead of time. Where am I going to go? Have I been there before? Do I know my route there, or is it someplace new? Do I need to call ahead and ask them if they have some kind of assistance or access instructions for me?" Um, I'm starting to try to get in the habit of taking pictures of businesses that are more than just Americans with Disability Act of 1990 compliant, because that's mostly suggestions, not statutory, doesn't have much teeth. But I'm looking at businesses that are wheelchair friendly, where they try to accommodate people in this situation more so than others.
Well, that's good stuff. And you talked about your world becoming now no more 3D. That now you're really so much concerned about what's in front of you. What's behind you, of course, gets to be a really difficult thing. But then what's underneath you as well. And I'm thinking maybe a little more globally. Or maybe drilling down a little more granularly, can we outline circumstances in ordinary life where you, as a wheelchair rider, feel the greatest threat to your safety, and then move through some of your solutions? Maybe a couple of for examples would be useful to people.
Yeah, yeah. Gila, one of the reasons we're moving to a town of 800 people in farm country, Illinois, one of the reasons is for the people. They're just overwhelmingly supportive and helpful. The other reason is safety. Uh, it's a town still where kids leave their bicycles out in the yard. Uh, Nobody locks their doors. I'm not going to say what the name of the town is. Um, and and I can ride around on my power chair very easily through the town to go to normal chores like bank or post office and things like that. So what I'm bringing that up for is my sense of feeling threat where I live right now is almost zero. However, when I go to bigger towns, 30,000 people, 40,000 people, 100,000 people, I stay away from Chicago like the plague. I have absolutely no use for that city. Sorry if some of you viewers live in Chicago. I won't, because I don't want to be at that heightened uh, level red, level black every time I walk out my door or even in my own house. So I've positioned myself to be safer, presumably safer. So that's one way I handle things, and that comes to the into the be somewhere else protocol also.
It does. Well, and even thinking about elevation, if you will. And while you and I, they might say, are both a little vertically challenged, the fact was for years and years we operated with our eyes at about 5 feet 1 or 2 inches on a good day, and maybe in high heels. But even things about your basic danger scan. Now that you're out in public in a seated position, does it change what you see and how well you can see what's coming down the sidewalk?
I keep my head on a swivel, so to speak, even more so now than I used to. Um, my awareness of people's activities, people's eye contact, people's gestures become even more acute and important. Um, Largely because I live in a difficult place right now. One of the big downsides is difficulty in legally carrying a gun. So I try to equip myself with other tools that will function. And when I can carry a gun, I will, which probably will lead into where and how, because that's a pretty complex story in this situation. But yeah, I think I keep rolling back to this maintaining distance, and that comes with awareness, looking for avenues of flight, um, looking for assistance, who can be of assistance, because the dangers are not just interpersonal. The dangers are going over a curb, and being on your side somewhere. On that point, I remember shortly after I got home from the hospital, and I was in a PT where I went to the hospital, to the facility every day. I fell. And fortunately, I still retain my ability to roll, kind of stuff. So I've fallen 3 times now. I haven't hurt myself. Thank you. But my way of overcoming that was the next day that I went to physical therapy. I said, put me on the ground and teach me how to get up from the ground. Because I don't want to be that whiny guy pushing the I'm falling and I can't get up button, or whining for please somebody help me, help me, help me. Sometimes I need help, and people have been gracious and helpful, but I want to be able to overcome as much as I can.
And I think that as I was preparing, and even our efforts to serve people without the kind of free mobility that we just take for granted, that one of the biggest concerns that I read about is being pulled or knocked from the chair. Are you willing to go to the ground and grapple? I mean, is that even an option? And where does that put you if someone is trying to take advantage of you?
Yep. Distance and keep them at bay with whatever means are necessary to stop their aggressive nature. Now, if I get ambushed, again, I keep going back to this. I try to be in places where the likelihood is minimal. But if I do, I'm not liking it, but I'm willing to do whatever is necessary to fight and claw my way through it. Um, one of the limitations is the arm, because I have a hard time rolling and getting onto certain positions that I used to be able to. Real simply, for instance, I have slept on my back for 7 months now, and every so often I try and wiggle myself over to be prone. It's very hard. It's really hard. Little things that flipping over in bed used to be didn't even think about it. So that ties into what you're asking about, going to the ground and grappling. Wouldn't want to, wouldn't like it. Hopefully, I'll have a weapon within close proximity to my grasp that I can use some extreme close quarter tactics and higher level of response. So I'm not trying to fight with one hand on the ground.
Let's segue briefly into firearms, and of course any techniques and tactics. So in your situation, you had an additional impediment, if you will, and that was that you did lose the left side mobility. Your adaptation, of course, has been one hand plus whatever backing up or moving, even bashing forward you could do with the wheelchair. But I'm wondering, years and years, those of us who avidly trained in self-defense armed skills, we worked one-handed techniques, and we worked clearing semi-auto malfunctions one-handed and one-handed reloads, and we did a lot of one-handed shooting, and thank God for that, because I say to our viewers, and I say this to myself, we could not have the use of our left or right side tomorrow. We could not have the use of our legs as we're accustomed to. So, I mean, there's good reason we were doing that, but I'm wondering, how practical did you find things like, one of the things I remember is racking a semi-auto slide by catching either a corner of the ejection port or part of the sights on a belt, or even a stiff corner. How did you do any work with that, and how practical was it for you?
Absolutely practical, and also not just practical, but necessity, because a couple of tools I found really important as I transition are my knees, for clamping things like a jar between my knees and being able to twist it. My teeth. Just this morning, I was trying to pay bills, and I'm trying to pull little things, pull the innards out of an envelope. And I'm trying to push the envelope with these fingers and pull the innards with this until I just take the back end of the envelope, bite it, and pull the innards out and throw the envelope away. So you adapt with parts of your body that you never would have considered before. What I do regarding firearms, and I want you to ensure that this is clear. Can you see the charge holes
I did, yes. Yeah.
right there? I guess. Okay. So what I do is I oftentimes resort to a revolver because I don't have the manipulative things I need to deal with, and my reload is a second revolver because I tried speed loaders, speed strips, ammo dumps, and it's just, I can put it between my knees and reload, but there's nothing fast about it, nothing at all quick. Our good friend, rest in peace, Jimmy Cirillo, used to talk about the New York reload, right? So that's become more than just a funny story. It's become, wow, maybe that's reality. Regarding auto-loading pistols, and again, clear, clear, clear. Um, I do have to use something to rack the slide on. I do put a holster here, and you're going to I wonder why cross draw. I'll get into that in a bit. But from there, I can empty mag. I can insert and do some reloading things that I need to. Um, One-handed shooting is critical. I'm going to get me about a 5-pound dumbbell because I don't work as much. I used to do a lot of construction, remodeling, things like that. So even my right arm is not worked out on a daily basis. So I'm going to use a 5-pound dumbbell to exercise a one arm projection, simulating a firearm.
Well, that's good. And I kind of wondered about even just basic safety concerns. And you talk about going to a cross draw so that your right hand can get a firing grip on the holster. And I wondered even things with safety. I mean, how did that change concerns about crossing a loaded gun's muzzle against across your legs? How did things change that way? How did you adapt and work out your safety concerns?
A lot of traditional carry is 5 o'clock or so, somewhere back here. And I've got torso mobility. I can do it. It's sometimes uncomfortable when I'm sitting with the gun there. A lot of people are limited if they're quads. If they're a friend of mine is paralyzed from an IED, paralyzed from the chest down, so he doesn't have the mobility to do things like this. Another acquaintance of mine, former military, went down in a helicopter crash. He can't feel, so he got pressure sores and didn't know he had it from holster rub. So these issues become important. I'm fortunate that I can feel, I can move my torso. So I thought I've transitioned maybe 4 or 5 years ago to appendix carry. And I'm not going to argue yes, no, good, bad, why not? I just did. But when you're standing, if you can visualize yourself standing, even in appendix carry, the muzzle's pretty much pointed maybe at your feet, but at the floor. And when you draw, if you're careful about your draw and not sweeping your own body from a standing position, it's relatively clean to do. In a seated position where your legs are sticking out in front of you, a draw from a seated position would have the muzzle immediately pointing at your legs. So in a cross draw, I wish I could show you, but in a cross draw, the holster is pointing slightly off my hips. So as I draw, unless I pull the trigger, the gun malfunction, an unintentional discharge should maybe graze me, but definitely not hit femoral arteries and things like that in the process. So it has become important to think about. I also use, I don't know if this is the right part to talk about it, or if I'm stomping on your future question. I also have built my kit bag um, where I've got back to the fanny pack because it's in a perfect location. I can keep all my EDC stuff in it. Part of my EDC stuff is even a charge cord for my phone because it's not as easy to be near an outlet and a USB port as it used to be. I can't just walk somewhere and plug in. So I carry that too. Um, and access to my firearm is simply ripping the zipper open and accessing it and coming out with it. And angles of muzzle and so forth are pretty clean, pretty clean. So off body carry, whether it's this or a sling bag, which goes diagonally over your body and access like this, are becoming more and more important to me because it's difficult to get my wallet, my pocket knife, and things out from where I would normally carry them. So everything's in here: wallet, um, sometimes firearm, a zippered pocket for my mobile phone. And so this is my man purse daily. Just FYI, I've got, oh, really important, my chapstick and a folding knife in one of the pockets too. So flashlight, folding knife, firearm when appropriate, chapstick, glasses, reading glasses, things like that.
What's interesting is really you move that cross draw up and down center line as needed to be, but really you've kept that orientation regardless where it's at, and so you've got some uniformity in where your hand's going, and also getting the ability to get that good high firing grip in what is serving as the holster, whatever is serving as the holster. Well, good stuff working through, because I'd wondered how you were going, how you were going that way, and let's see, boy, you covered a lot of ground there, which was great. But I'm also wondering, falling back just to the simple one-handed shooting that we spent so much time working. How is recoil handling? You talked about that you were going to be building up that right side. I mean, say a 357 Magnum revolver, for example, or a very lightweight Scandium revolver for ease of carry. How are you coping with that? What is it? Is that a 38 or a 357?
It's a 38. It's a 642 Smith & Wesson. Really good question. Probably one of the most shocking recoil incidents I've ever had, and it's kind of funny, is I was up at the Smith & Wesson factory when they were introducing the 500 Smith & Wesson revolver. Well, I can't remember. Were you there?
No, I wasn't. Although I shot a couple of rounds out of that down at Texas Thunder Ranch, and that was enough for me. I didn't need to do it again.
I hear you. I remember shooting the 8 3/8" barrel was abusive. And then they brought out the Alaskan 2-inch barrel 500 Smith & Wesson. And being manly, I said, yeah, I'll shoot that. I loaded one round, braced myself almost horizontal, fired one round, felt the shock wave through my hands, my arm, my shoulder, put the gun, opened the cylinder up, put it down, said, I'm done. And the funny part of the story is I thought I was really being a wuss about a 2-inch barrel 500, and I'm going, I mean, it shocked right up through my whole right arm, left arm. I ran into Todd Jarrett, and I think it was maybe Ernest Langston, two top shooters in the country. And we were having lunch together, and I said, hey, what'd you guys think of that 2-inch barreled 500? They looked at me and they said, what do you think I am, bleeping stupid? I'm not going to shoot that gun. So I realized I was both a wuss and stupid at the same time. But recoil mitigation is important. I've always preached that follow-up shots are important. Recovery shots, how much time between recovery, between shots is important. I've always preached that, and I may not be totally on target here, but unless the bad guy is totally messed up on PCP, flak up, bath salts, they're not going to want to get shot. And hopefully the dissuasion of getting somebody to stop, back up, will be impactful with virtually any round. And if not, the recovery time between multiple rounds becomes clearer, sight acquisition becomes quicker and more immediate. So regarding, for instance, this gun, I have for years, you wouldn't believe this of me, Gila, but gone against the flow of thinking. And I have for years advocated 148 grain wad cutter target load, especially for elderly people, people with carpal tunnel, tiny people, because I'd rather have them fire 1, 2, 3 shots of 825 feet per second flat, big cross section rounds at an adversary with quick recovery than have that one magic 125 grain jacketed hollow point, et cetera, and closing their eyes every time they fired a shot from the gun. So I look at it a little differently. And apparently, talking to Rob Garrett, that wad cutter is making a comeback. The light load wad cutter, they're being produced by Georgia Arms, I think is one company, specifically with that intent in mind. So recovery, I tend to try and keep away from major recoil issues rather than to try and cope with it and deal with it. And that's my odd way of looking at things.
There's room at the table for people with lots of different needs, and you particularly address that when these things happen to people, they may be advanced in years. Is that person really going to start carrying a 357 Magnum? I don't think so. At least not, not successfully and not doing the work to build up to it. Absent your 5-pound weight lifting regimen for your right side, yes, you go, Clyde. But no, I think there's absolutely room for varying ways of dealing with it, and no one is going to look down on you, for that. And that really brings us into this whole idea of mentoring, and not only being you'll hate this, but being the wonderful example, being the inspiration. That mentoring and being able to talk to people and say, here's my experience, but I think you would do better. Maybe with a 32. There's all kinds of options there. So talk to me a little bit about mentoring. Talk to me a little bit about reaching out to others. Not only your goals and dreams for chair rider, but will there be classes? Can we come take a wheelchair shooting class from Clyde? What about even things like pepper spray or pepper gel use? Where are we going with this? What's your dream?
Well, as far as self-defense goes and the ability to defend oneself out of a chair, I think ultimately a handgun is a very viable tool, especially if the nature of where you live is with flagrantly violent people. And then the use of force will dictate that sometimes lethal force is appropriate and maybe even the best option. But I also definitely, as you do, believe in gradients of response, whether it's verbal, whether it's audible, hitting an alarm. I'm not so big on the whistle because you can't talk while you got a whistle in your mouth, but other ways. I'm even thinking of building ways of putting lightweight armor on a person, like I'm carving out a small piece that fits this, that's about 5 by 8. That is a level 3A, which stops up to 44 Magnum. And trying to devise ways of putting kits together for people that are more concerned about acute problems in their neighborhood. But I firmly believe, whether it's an edged weapon, which is a lethal weapon, but that's a good close quarter tool to get your way out of the grasp of someone. I've been a huge proponent of pepper spray. It doesn't work all the time, but it works most of the time. And the ability to keep people back, to keep them, say, at 10 feet or further is really a strong goal with what we do. So there's the mechanical part with using your hands and feet or whatever you've got capability of. And then there's the weapons that push people away, like pepper spray. I'm not a big proponent of tasers or what's the one you hold in your hand and stick on people? Stun guns. Stun guns because they require intimate contact. So you either got to close the distance or you got to wait till they close the distance, and neither one works for me. Maybe a taser, but again, they're a little bit complicated. And even in law enforcement, a taser is always supported by lethal force, backing it up. Pepper spray, you mentioned the word gel. You know, there's fogs, there's foams, there's gel, there's spray, and everybody has to do their own research based on the environment. Little things like how windy is it where you tend to be mobile in, um, because there's pluses and minuses to each of those different delivery systems.
Well, and I don't know if this is practical or not, but are you doing any work with ramming, even with the feet rests on the chair, or how much is the chair part of your toolkit, or is it not at all?
It's not really. The ramming part, there usually isn't enough torque. Um, if you had both arms mobile, then maybe you can shove yourself in, and that might work if you jammed it into somebody's shins or something. But again, that requires closing the gap. So if somebody's 4 feet away and I try to ram them, that means I'm within their arm's distance. So it may work. If somebody's already on top of you, you may be able to be evasive. Generally, there isn't enough in a mechanical chair, a power chair. There isn't enough immediate torque to launch yourself. I suppose the makers don't want people getting whiplash every time they press on the toggle. I'd like a ton more torque. I saw a video of a guy that converted his power chair. I don't know how he did it, but he clocked himself doing 55 miles an hour in a power chair. Normally they go 5, 6 miles an hour, but I don't recommend that for anybody to try at home. But there's some other mobility issues that come about by being in a chair. One, your ability to scan is greatly reduced unless you can because you can't turn your whole torso and even your hips. Your ability to react because of the torque curve on a chair or the grip and pulling with your arm, it takes time. And one of the biggest limitations that I've discovered is your six. To be able to protect your six. One, maybe if you had a little mirror or a little camera, you could see if somebody approaching. But if you didn't, you'd have to somehow be alert to it. And you can't just spin around and change your footing like we do on feet. You've got to turn the wheelchair around. And on a concrete floor, it probably takes 3 seconds to turn around and face your six. If you're in grass, sand, heavy carpet, gravel, you could be stuck there for several seconds trying to manipulate your way around. So I don't know where you want me to insert this, but that's gotten me working on how do you address your six. And you remember one of the things I was a huge proponent on for a number of years, and that's the correct laser sighting system. Because the one thing a laser does, proven over and over, is it gives you an accuracy point, much like taking your sights and extending a line from it. It gives you that accuracy point projected on your threat. And most importantly, you don't have to have a linear alignment between eyeballs, rear sight, front sight, and target. So long as you can see the dot, even if it's like this and you peripheralize over your shoulder and can see that, well, let me use this, and can see the dot, you can shoot. And to me, being immobile with my six, I can get to about maybe 7, and I can get to about 5, but I'd have to really torque with my sights. But to get to 6, that area between 5 and 7 is hard.
And you need to be able to see it to do some judgment calls. Anyway, but yes, I remember you working with shields and riot shields and that type of thing, where we literally did not have our eyes behind the sights, and you've done a great adaptation of that, leveraging technology, as it were, to serve a current need. It's going to be so interesting to see where else this goes for you, Clyde. What's ahead for you?
Well, more work on the same. Chairwriter.com is a whole mission I have to help wounded veterans, injured first responders, or anybody that's mobilely restricted in a chair. And ahead is information transmission. Ahead is I'm planning on, hopefully I've got several nonprofits that I've started to ally with, um, and mostly doing work for vets, but not always. There's one fishing nonprofit up in the Great Lakes that's doing a fishing excursion for people, anybody in wheelchairs. And what I'd like to do is help interact with them, help support them, have them help support what I do. And with that in mind, just yesterday I was thinking, well, instead of just posting who these nonprofits are, let me go and seek nonprofits that need alliances and help. And I'd like ChairWriter.com to be a nexus for nonprofit information. So anybody in a wheelchair can go, I wonder how I can learn to garden while in a wheelchair. Well, let me go to ChairWriter.com. Oh, look, there's the Gardening Wheelchair Club of Onalaska, Washington. And find out whatever, give them the ability to find missions, to more than just sit around, to get out, do things productively, do things with heart. And so one of my missions currently is to start to collate a list of nonprofits, which I'm going to ask everybody out there if they know of organizations, nonprofits that are helping people, vets or otherwise, um, to help deal with being able to expand the horizons of being in a wheelchair, that they'd contact you or me and help me gather that all together.
Well, excellent. And I think that the more active we are, the more fully that we're leading life, then your specialty of the self-defense concerns becomes much more pertinent, because now we are going out in public. Now we do say, well, what if I do run into someone who wants to do me harm? And gosh, Clyde, I would love to see you start doing weekly videos on that subject, or writing extensively, certainly teaching classes. So keep us in the loop. We love what you're doing, and your attitude is just so inspirational. What's the takeaway for network members that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I guess it would be that I'm sure, especially if demographics we're talking are 60s and up, they may not be mobilely restricted, but I'm sure the world around them, there are more and more people that are mobilely restricted, whether it's a family member or just someone they used to work with, someone at their golf club, wherever it might be. But just try and be motivational to them. It's tough because it's always easy from a wheelchair to say, well, easy for you to say, but be positive with them. And also people that are in a chair, be positive with people you engage with. A lot of times people get flustered because they feel like they're being stared at. Well, I get that. And I just understand, I used to be 5'6", now I'm 3'10", so I'm pretty short right now. I'm below their eye level. So people are going to look and go, oh, where'd he come from? And I'm sure their thinking is, I wonder what happened to him. And then they change their gaze because they realize they're staring at you. A lot of wheelchair people get offended by all that. Just go with it. Engage them, greet them, say hi, how you doing? And let them ask questions if they want to. Kids will stare. A lot of people get offended at that. You are different looking. I mean, you just are. Not everybody's running around on wheels. So I would encourage all those who have any affiliation with somebody with reduced mobility to help them, point them in directions where they can become more positive about, if they are upset about where they are, more positive about it, and find things. The first article I put on our newsletter was finding missions. Mine, remember my first ones were open my wallet and get things out and wipe my own butt. Well, now the missions are getting a little bit more big, but a little bit difficult to achieve. So if I can shamelessly say, please go to chairwriter.com, see what we do. We've listed Gila's organization as one of our partners, which I'm proud to have there.
Well, we're proud to have you on board with us, Clyde, and absolutely, we want to do what we can to share the word, and we want people to plug into the great resource that you are, because again, going way back to what we talked about at the beginning, folks, we're talking with someone who's got a lifetime practice of martial arts here, somebody who is a highly skilled shooter and is working to adapt these things to life in a chair. Reach out to Clyde. He wants to be a resource to you, and we want him to be, because I think, as strange as it sounds to say, the future's bright. And there are enormous needs out there. Clyde, God bless you for what you're doing. Be in touch with me and let me know how let me know how we can be part of it.
Thank you, and me of yours.